Hello and welcome to Nature Days Outdoor Learning Resources, sponsored by the Gower Society. Now my challenge for you today is to build yourself a pond. Now one of the best ways to attract wildlife into your garden is to have a pond, but it doesn't have to be anything too elaborate or too big. I'm going to use just an old washing up bowl to make my pond. So this is what you will need. Somewhere in your garden to put your pond, somewhere you're allowed to dig, that's not going to dig up something that your parents want to keep. Also somewhere that's easy to dig, it's not got loads of roots or is too stony. You'll also need something that's watertight, some bowl, it could be a big bowl, it could be a bucket, anything that's going to hold the water in. You're also going to need to be able to dig up, so you'll need a spade. You'll need some gravel for the bottom or tiny stones, and then some bigger stones, some rainwater, and if you can manage to find some water plants. So this is what you need to do. First you need to dig your hole. Make sure you keep the soil because you'll be backfilling to the size of your bowl. Then make sure your bowl fits so it will be flush to the top of the surface. If it's too deep, just put some stones or a bit of soil underneath to raise it up. Next we're going to fill in our pond. Next, fill the bottom of your pond with gravel, not soil, otherwise the water will be very murky. Next, we need to put some rocks into our pond so that our animals, when they get big enough or want to leave the pond, they can do that. So we can use any stones we've got. So I'm going to use some large ones with a bit of a ramp so they can make their way up to the top. So ponds, for lots of different animals, you need lots of different depths. So a big variety of depth is really good for a large diversity of animals. And lastly, we need to fill our pond with water. So make sure that you use rainwater. So if you can leave some buckets out, or if you've got a water butt, use that. And then we're just going to fill it up. If you haven't got any rainwater, if it hasn't rained for a while, you can always use pond water, but don't use tap water because there'll be chemicals inside it which are not good for our animals or our plants. So now that our pond is full, we can put some plants inside it. Now if you know someone who's got a pond, they could give you some pond plants. That would be really useful because you can't dig them up if they're in the wild. What you want is some native pond plants. So think about some pondweed. We're not talking about the lily pads, especially if you've got a small pond, because that will choke up your pond. So you want something that's natural, not going to grow too big. It's going to provide some oxygen inside your pond so that your animals can still breathe. So something not too small, not too big. Also, there are some plants which are found in ponds which can take over. So things like duckweed or cressula or Canadian pondweed. These ones tend to grow so fast that they choke up your pond and your pond will just be a stagnant pond full of plants with no animals living in it. So don't put too many in. Put it into a plant pot with some soil, submerge that into your pond, and then all you have to do is wait. The important thing about ponds is to leave them to allow them to establish. So you could bring in some tadpoles or some frog spawn if you find them in a puddle. But if you bring in fish, for example, then they're going to eat any animals that fly in. And a lot of pond animals can fly. Lots of beetles, obviously water beetles, water boatmen, but also dragonflies. So if they come in and they lay eggs in your pond, if you've got fish in there, the fish are going to eat them. So you have to decide, do you want a natural pond which is full of lots of invertebrates, or do you want to have a fish pond? Two really can't go together. So leave it and you'll be amazed how quickly it will actually start to establish as a pond with lots of animals. Now the last thing we've got to do, we've got to backfill the gap around the pond so that this soil doesn't fall into it, and so there's no gap so the animals don't crawl out and fall into the soil as well. So we want it to be nice and straight. Now, if you can't dig a hole for your pond, but you still want to have one, you can have it on the surface, but you have to build up around it. So you can either build up the soil so that it meets the sides, so you form like a hill up to it, or you can surround it by rocks and a bit of soil to keep them in place. So if you can't bury it, you can build up the sides. But if you have it just freestanding, sitting on the surface, then if the animals climb up your rocks to the edge of your bowl, they're either going to fall off or they won't know where to go and they'll go back into the pond. So make sure it's either flush with the surface or they can climb out or climb down from the pond. Now, if you manage to make your own pond in your garden or in your school grounds, then please do send me a photo, tweet it, #NatureDays, or put it on the Facebook page. And I'll see you tomorrow for our next Outdoor Learning Challenge.